I was in attendance for my first Ring of Honor show since their joint show with New Japan at Madison Square Garden. Over WrestleMania weekend, I was not impressed by what I saw on that show from the ROH side. But Manhattan Mayhem last night was a good rebound, I think, for Ring of Honor. Attendance-wise, a lot of talk going into the show about attendance. Didn't look very good on Ticketmaster, and they blocked off, most of the balcony, and how many people are they going to get at this show? I will say this. It's been a while since I've been inside the Hammerstein for a Ring of Honor show, and it was they definitely did not pack in the Hammerstein the way they used to. And in that respect, it was very sad. Nor did they announce a return date for the venue, which I thought was telling. Again, they're not coming back in December for Final Battle. They're almost always in New York City, and this year they're going to be, I believe, in Baltimore. So I thought that was a telling sign, not even a mention of any kind of return show to the venue. But I would say the attendance was pretty decent. When I took that picture and I put it on Twitter, which I did last night, I got to the building, I got to my seat, I turned around, and I wanted to just take a picture of the set. But in the picture, you literally saw one person sitting in the seats. Like Lonely Virgil. And this was maybe 15 minutes, not even 20 minutes before the television taping portion was scheduled to begin. Keep in mind, the original start time for this show was 8 p.m. And that's what it still said on my ticket. And I don't know when they made the change, if it was a week ago, 10 days ago, I don't know. But at some point in the last week or 2 weeks, they changed the start time from 8 p.m. to 7 p.m. In fact, I got a phone call on Friday from Ticketmaster. Which I did not answer. And then I got a message from Ticketmaster, and I thought, well, maybe they canceled the show. Maybe the attendance is worse than I thought. But I listened to the message, and they were just saying, for those of you who don't know, this 8 p.m. event has now been moved up to 7 p.m. Not making excuses for them, because there was still enough time for people to know, the new start time. But there may have been some of that, because by the time 8 p.m. rolled around and they went live on Honor Club with some of the matches that streamed, it definitely filled in a lot more. And in my section, if I was to take the same photo, an hour later, not all, but most of those seats would have been full. They did a pretty good job of making sure the floor seats were full. There were some people from what I saw who may have had tickets up in some of the balcony sections who were moved down. The upper balcony level was almost completely barren. I saw a few people up there. The middle balcony section was more full, but not totally full. So it filled in nicely enough, but you could just tell this is not the same Ring of Honor, that would have easily packed that building in maybe even a year ago, let alone 2, 3, 4 years ago. And as somebody who's been in that building for a lot of shows over a lot of years, it was sad. It was sad to see that. I will say this about the crowd, though. Loud all night long. Very loud all night long. And very enthusiastic about most of what they saw on the show. It felt like 110 degrees in New York City yesterday. As hot as it is today, it was like this yesterday. We're in the middle of this heat wave. But that was the heat index. 110 yesterday in New York. So when you combine the whole Ticketmaster time change thing, did the heat affect things? I don't want to blame the heat because, people were going to buy their ticket in advance not knowing it was going to be 1,000 degrees in New York. So I'm not willing to sit here and make those excuses, although you might hear that from some people. Oh, it was hot and the trains weren't working. Look, the ticket situation in Ring of Honor is no secret. This is not some kind of anomaly. They've had issues. They've had a lot of issues lately, and they have no buzz around them whatsoever. And AEW has really stolen a lot of their thunder. To some extent, MLW, I think, is also a victim of this AEW hype. All of this hype around all Elite Wrestling and all the excitement and, getting ready for the TNT show. You got All Out coming up in a month. MLW had a little bit of buzz, and they've cooled down a little bit in that respect, too. It's the AEW effect. They're kind of sucking up all the oxygen in the room. Once they're finally on television and we get a sense of what we could expect from their product every week, it'll be, that might be the best time for an MLW or a Ring of Honor to try to steal back some buzz. Because Ring of Honor just has none at all whatsoever. And they've got some talented guys on that roster. And they have something AEW and MLW and these other companies don't have, at least for now, which is the continued working relationship with New Japan and with CMLL. In fact, before the show started last night, they asked everybody to rise, and they had a 10-bell salute for Paco Alonso, which I thought was very classy on their part. But I was sitting there in that building last night, and I thought to myself, it's amazing. As I look at some of these faces, I think back to the very first Ring of Honor show that I ever attended, which was the last show they ever did, around the corner, in the ballroom at the New Yorker Hotel. And I remember they had, Carrie Silken was there. I'm pretty sure Carrie Silken was there. Bobby Cruz was handling the ring announcing. Todd Sinclair, was probably their lead referee. They had Paul Turner. He now is with AEW. But Todd Sinclair, Bobby Cruz, Carrie Silken, who, sold to Sinclair, but he sort of kept around, I guess, as this ceremonial figurehead. He's at all the shows, and there would be no Ring of Honor right now were it not for Carrie Silken. Everybody in that company owes him a lot. There would be no ROH if he did not keep that company afloat with his own money. So you see some of those old faces, and it's cool in a way, but in some ways it also makes you think about all the people who have moved on, and to see Ring of Honor kind of plateau in a way is kind of sad to see. Most of the matches streamed live on their Honor Club service, but before they went live, they did tape some matches for television. So if you are leery of spoilers for ROH TV, you have been warned. You might want to skip ahead by about 5 minutes. Among the matches they taped, Tracy Williams won a 4-way over Silas Young, Josh Woods, and the TV champion Shane Taylor. A pretty good match. Kelly Klein retained her Women of Honor title over Carissa Rivera. I didn't think this was very good. The Allure came out after the match, Velvet Sky and Angelina Love, to cut a promo on Kelly Klein. Thankfully, nobody shouted anything mean at them this time, even though, they're heels and all. Can't shout anything mean at them, though. You don't want to hurt their feelings. And Villain Enterprises beat the Shinobi Shadow Squad of Cheeseburger, Ryan Nova, and Eli Isom. And I will say this, my biggest takeaway from this was how frickin' over PCO was. Loud PCO chants. Every time he was in or he did something, people went nuts for this guy. I mean, they like Villain Enterprises in general. Brody King got a great reaction. Marty Scurll got a great reaction. But in that match, what really struck me was the reaction to PCO. At 51 years old, this guy's a champion. I remember when he signed with Ring of Honor, he said it was the biggest contract of his career. And he spent many years in WWE as a singles wrestler, as a tag team wrestler. Although I guess those were the lean years. Like in 95 when he came in as the Pirate. Business wasn't great, I would imagine. And this was even before the whole guaranteed contract thing. So I guess it really isn't that surprising when you think about it, that this would be the biggest contract of his entire life. And at his age and this stage of his career, hey, good for him, man. I'll say this much. There are people in his situation who are veterans, who are older, who are in their 40s, let alone their 50s, who could sign a contract and just sort of coast. They can just sort of coast and rest on their laurels and rest on their name and do the bare minimum and not hurt themselves and make a good living. This guy, more than he should, he goes out there and he just puts his body on the line like he don't care, like he's living the last day of his life. He's been told that he's got a terminal illness, he's got 3 hours left to live, and he's like, I don't give a shit. And he goes out there and he's doing moonsaults and cannonballs off the top rope and dives out of the ring and through tables. This guy's out of his mind. And everybody chants, he's not human. I'm debating whether or not that may be true. So whatever they're paying him, he earns it. He earns it. He doesn't rest on his laurels. He goes out there and he busts his ass. And I think that's why people appreciate him. So the main card, and you may have seen this if you were tuned in, although how many of you actually were tuned in, I'm guessing probably not too many of you, but we had Dragon Lee beating Jonathan Gresham with a running knee strike in what I thought was a pretty good match. Ring of Honor champion Matt Taven, he came out here in New York wearing a Boston Red Sox jersey, shitting on the Yankees. Easy heel heat. He got to throw out the first pitch earlier this week at Fenway Park in Boston while wearing the ROH title around his waist. He called it the best day of his life. Kenny King came out. He was able to convince Taven to add him to his title match later in the show. It was going to be Taven defending against Jay Lethal, and now it turned into a three-way with Lethal, Taven, and Kenny King. Jay Lethal was not happy. He came out. He was not happy about Kenny King being added to this match later on. We had the Bouncers, which is the team of the Beer City Bruiser and Brian Malonis. They won a three-way over Coast to Coast, and the Soldiers of Savagery. Soldiers of Savagery, they kind of dress up like AOP, but they've got a great look. They just come out and they destroy shit. They had a squash match on the TV taping earlier. So yeah, they've got a great look. But the Bouncers got the win. I love how when they get announced, they're from the bar. I don't know. I get a kick. I like the Beer City Bruiser. We had TK Orion and Vinny Marseglia from the Kingdom. They came out when this match was over, and they beat the piss out of the Bouncers with steel chairs. And Orion stayed in the ring to call out Roosh for the next match. Roosh and Dragon Lee were late in getting to the building. They had some travel issues, so they missed their meet and greets. Ring of Honor was offering full refunds to anybody who was supposed to meet them. So they missed their meet and greets, but they did make it in time for their matches. So it was Roosh against TK Orion, and this was more back and forth than I would have expected. Although the expected outcome, Roosh picks up the win. After the match, Roosh he's fist bumping fans outside the ring, and he bumps fists with this guy in a lucha mask, who then ends up attacking him and throwing him back into the ring. And later on, this person unmasked, and it was Dalton Castle. And I'm old enough to remember a time when Dalton Castle was popular for a hot minute. It's too bad he had all those back problems. It pretty much ruined his title run. I mean, people wanted to see this guy become the champion. He became the champion. Although you could argue, I think they waited too long to put the belt on him. But eventually he won the title, and his back was just thrashed. And he had a very forgettable title run. And I kind of feel bad for him because once he had his big opportunity, his body betrayed him. And I don't know that he'll ever be able to get that momentum back. Now he's a heel, and they'll kind of have to build him back up, I think, to get him back to the point, because he used to be very, very popular. And now you really just don't hear about the guy. The Ring of Honor Championship match was oddly, although I guess not oddly since there was a title change later on, but third from the top here on this show. Matt Taven defending against Jay Lethal and Kenny King. This was a very good match. Taven retained the title. They had the crowd convinced, though, that Lethal was winning after he hit the lethal injection. A very close near fall. But Taven retained clean. Although, clean as it was. There were no heel shenanigans or cheating or anything like that. But when the match was over, Lethal put his hand out for a handshake. Taven accepted. And then he hit Lethal with a low blow to remind everybody that he is still a piece of garbage. Villain Enterprises came back out. Their second match of the night. Marty Scurll, Brody King, PCO, and the newest addition to Villain Enterprises, Flip Gordon, who is suffering from an injury. He didn't do too much here. They took on Lifeblood, the team of Bandito, Mark Haskins, Tracy Williams, and the Darewolf PJ Black. I thought this was great. Bandito is awesome. PCO is awesome. Brody King is awesome. 51-year-old PCO is out there thinking he's Terry Funk in ECW, hitting a moonsault off the top rope out to the floor. Then 2 minutes later, he took an apron sunset bomb, did PCO, and he hit the edge of the ring, and he fell to the floor. I don't think we saw him again after that. That looked like it would probably suck to be taking that move. And Lifeblood picked up the win after a 450 splash by PJ Black connected. And that kind of surprised me, but this was a great match. Main event for the Ring of Honor World Tag Team Championship was the Briscoes, Jay and Mark, who PW Insider says re-signed in the last few months with Ring of Honor. So I think they're pretty much lifers in that company. That's probably where they'll end their career. I mean, how old are these guys at this point? I keep thinking they're older than they probably are. I don't want to sit here and say, well, that's the last big contract they'll ever sign, because maybe it won't be. But I look at these two as pretty much lifers. And just think about it. If Jay had kept his mouth shut and not tweeted some dumb shit all those years ago, they may well be in WWE today. There was definite interest. Maybe from both sides, but there was definite interest from WWE in signing them. And this was a number of years ago, and Jay, I think on Twitter, he made some comments that were very, hey, he's entitled to his opinion, but WWE is also entitled not to sign somebody if they think they're going to cause them problems. And so that never ended up happening. Although I will say, I don't know how long they would have lasted in WWE. I somehow think that would have ended poorly, and they probably would have been back in Ring of Honor, anyway. But we had the Briscoes challenging the Gorillas of Destiny, Tama Tonga and Tangaloa, holders of both the IWGP and ROH tag team titles, coming out of that MSG show over WrestleMania weekend. No Enzo or Big Cass on this show, in case you were wondering, which I'm sure you were not. This was just a wild brawl. Kendo stick shots, chair shots, table spots, right down to the Briscoes bringing a big-ass ladder into the ring. This thing had to be every bit of 12 to 15 feet high. Mark Briscoe climbs up the ladder on one side. Jay gets Tama Tonga up on his shoulders, down on the mat, and he's setting up for what looked like a doomsday device. Mark came off with a giant elbow, and Tama Tonga almost did a complete rotation through the table that had been set up inside the ring. The Briscoes get the pin, and the Briscoes win their 11th Ring of Honor Tag Team Championship. A really fun show, a really fun brawl, and a really fun show, I thought, on the whole. But it may be a while yet before they run that venue again, so that'll be something to follow when they do come back to New York. Do they come back to the Hammerstein, which I'm sure is not cheap to run? Do they come back to the Manhattan Center but run the Grand Ballroom up on the 8th floor like they used to do? Maybe that's a little bit cheaper, I don't know. Or do they go back to a place like Terminal 5, which I remember there being a lot of complaints about sight lines and stuff. It's a dance club. And Ring of Honor had a whole bunch of shows at Terminal 5 before coming back to Hammerstein. It may well be a case where they end up going back to Terminal 5. But for one night anyway, I thought they did a good job of just, cleaning out the sour taste that Madison Square Garden show, I really think, left in a lot of people's mouths. New Japan delivered on their end that night, but there was a lot of disappointment where ROH was concerned. But this was a really fun show on the whole.